What's up, everybody? My name is Jacob Hardison, and today we're going to revisit bump steer. Welcome back, everybody, to, of course, the lovely Adrenaline RC YouTube channel, where today, as you heard in the intro, we are going to be revisiting bump steer. Now, it has come to my attention through some comments that there were some people that weren't quite thrilled, per se, about my bump steer video, to say the least. And I figured that I would go back and add some extra information to it as well. Definitely looking at it, I don't think that the information I said was necessarily incorrect per se, but I can certainly see where maybe some of my wording could be misinterpreted. And then, like I said, I want to go and add some extra information to it that I didn't say in the first one. That way, of course, as always, when you're at the track, you have as much information as possible. Now, before we dive into today's video and go into the visual and then, of course, the explanation end of things, I do want to take a moment and just look at my glorious new body on my B4 here. This was painted up by Mr. Ronnie Setzer down at SS Hobbies, and it looks so spectacular. So I'm very, very happy with how it came out, so I figured I'd throw some clips in of it up close because, well, it's just, we all love having a nice fresh body. It goes perfect with the nice clean wheels and tires, the nice wing. It all comes together. And then to also go along with that, while my B4 looks absolutely spectacular, I will be announcing later on in this video a waffle on a B4. I don't have the box here with me at the very, very moment, but we are going to be doing a waffle on one in honor of our 1-year YouTube anniversary. So now that we've gotten the short spiel out of the way, like I said, stay tuned, of course, to the end of the video to hear about how to get in on the waffle. But without further ado, we'll go ahead and update our bump steer. All right, so here we are with the buggy out in front of us. And what we're going to do today is, just like in the first video, I'm going to manipulate my upper arm position, which is truly a caster change, but bump steer is a byproduct of that because we will be adjusting the height of that point there. So even though we're not directly adjusting it, this is enough to be able to provide a visual representation. So with our arm all the way forward, this a little bit higher, what you'll notice is that as we compress, we start to get toe out, and as we come back to neutral, it toes back into a more neutral point, or in theory, what your static toe could potentially be. Now, obviously, when you're on the track, you're not going to be at the exact neutral point, but you can potentially be under full compression. So you can see we get some toe out. This would be considered bump out. Now, if we move this back, what you'll notice as we push this down is it's not nearly as aggressive of an effect. Now what I can do is actually, while I'm at full compression, I can try to do this with one hand. If I just move this forward, you can see we get more toe out. If I move this backwards, you can see we toe in a little bit. So that's kind of a way to be able to see what can happen as you come through our compression. Now, what I didn't go over in the first video was what happens pretty much as you come all the way through. I touched on it a little bit there, but we talked about our stroke down, our compression. But as you come back up, like I said, you'll notice this tire kind of toes back in a little bit. And then as you go to full extension, it almost gains a little bit more toe out. So in this case, we go from bump out to a more neutral and then kind of back to that toe out. Now, obviously, this isn't a very aggressive version of that. It's a very, very minor toe out gain as we come to the extension. But it is important to note that because bump steer isn't going to be something that only affects compression, it's going to affect extension as well. Now, a couple of things can happen here. As you compress, you could go to toe out and then full extension, go to toe out, kind of like what we have here. Or you go from toe out at extension to, compression, and then go to full extension and notice that your tires toe in. Or you could have the opposite effect. So it's important to note what will happen because that will, of course, affect how the car comes into the turn and then also how it comes out of the turn. So again, we need to make sure we don't just look at compression. We also need to look at what happens when we come back up because that will affect how the car's steering reacts under acceleration to some extent. So now that we've gone over this visual end of things to show you the bump out, we'll pull this tire off and I'll show you what's actually changing in here that is making that happen. So now that we've got the tire off the car, we're going to very specifically be looking at this point here, because it's going to be a manipulation of this linkage. So with the arm all the way forward, you'll notice this current position. So note this. Then if I move the arm back, you'll see that this drops. If I move the arm forward, then this raises. Now, in an ideal world, theoretically, the only thing or the way you would change bump steer would be to manipulate the angle of this by either adding or taking away washers on this side or from the steering rack side. Now, obviously, we aren't in a perfect world, so we know that other things on the front end are going to manipulate this. For example, like we just saw, our caster. Now, in this case, it's an upper arm adjustment, but if you're on a C-hub car, for example, then, if you change your caster block, or maybe you change your kick-up in here, that will then affect your overall caster, which then affects your overall bump steer because that's going to manipulate this link. Pretty much anytime you make a steering geometry adjustment on the front of your car, it's going to be important to note what your bump steer ends up doing. Now, there are going to be some things that don't make it change. Obviously, if you go from the outside hole here to the inside hole for your shock, that isn't going to change your bump steer. But there are definitely a few things that can manipulate the height other than just adding or reducing washers here. So it's always good to note and always good to check. It doesn't mean that it's going to be a dramatic change every single time, but it's a good thing to keep an eye on just to make sure that it does stay consistent. So now that we know some of the things that can manipulate it and how to actually manipulate it, let's head back and we'll go over what these changes are actually going to do to the car on the track. So now that we've gone over the visual end of things and we've gone over the extra nuances that I wanted to talk about, we'll of course now go over the explanation as to what is going to happen on the track depending on what setting is happening on the front of your vehicle. Now I'm going to split this into two sections. One is going to be as you come into the turn, and then the other is going to be as you come out. So as you're coming into the turn, generally you are compressing the front, and then as you're coming out of the turn, you're extending the front. So two different things can happen depending on what your setup is. Now, as you're coming into the turn, let's say your tires toe out more, so you have bump out. That is going to smooth out your steering. It's going to physically take angle away from your outside tire. This is going to be my outside tire today. So it's going to feel less aggressive. You'll kind of lose steering, if that makes sense, to some extent, because you are taking angle out of that outside tire. And then also to go along with that, because the outside tire is now less grabby, it is also going to be better on a choppy track because, again, not going to be nearly as grabby. Now, let's say that as you compress the front, it is going to toe in. So now that is going to add steering angle to our outside tire, which means that it's going to feel more aggressive. It'll feel like it has a bit more kind of initial steering as you're coming into it, because the more you compress that front end, the more angle you get on the outside tire, which means that you get more steering. And to go along with that, it's going to be something that you see more on a smooth track because, again, it is more aggressive, so it would grab the chop more. So you don't want to use that on a choppy track. So as a quick recap for going into the turn, bump out is pretty much going to smooth the steering out and be better on a choppy track. Bump in is going to generally be more aggressive and is going to be better on a smoother track. Now to transition now to coming out of the turn, so now we're lifting the front end up. If the tires begin to toe out as you extend your front end, generally you're going to feel like the car is going to be smoother coming out of the turn. It's not going to be super aggressive on throttle. It's going to be a nice easy transition, I guess you could say, as you come through and now out of the turn. The opposite, of course, happens if the tires decide to toe in more, because again, you have more angle on that outside, it's more grabby. So if the tires begin to bump in, I guess it wouldn't be bump in, but if they begin to toe in as you extend and come out of the turn, then you could experience the car feeling a bit more aggressive. So again, as a recap now for as you come out of the turn, if the tires toe out as you extend the front end, the car is going to feel smoother. If the tires toe in under extension, then it is going to generally feel more aggressive. So not a whole lot of extra changes necessarily from the first video to this video, but I did think that it was at least enough of a wording and an important change and update to make. That way, of course, you guys have as much knowledge as possible. That is my #1 goal. So if I ever feel like I can give you more of that information, I will, do another update video like this because I want you to be successful. So now that we've gone over our bump steer end of things, we'll end off our video, of course, with our 1-year YouTube anniversary waffle. So here it is, our newest waffle here on the Adrenaline RC channel in honor of our 1-year anniversary on YouTube. Before I get super far into how this is going to work, I of course want to say thank you to everybody for liking, subscribing, sharing our videos, and joining us on this adventure and helping us get as much information out to the RC community as possible. You guys are awesome. Thank you very much. And we're going to continue doing our best to further the information out into the lovely interwebs. So now that I've done my super short spiel, we'll get into the important thing that everybody wants to know, which is how can you win this kit? So it's gonna be $15 a ticket, and we're gonna sell 50 tickets. No more tickets, no less tickets. And then whenever all of those tickets sell, I will do the spin the wheel, and I'll get that posted into our next going out video. So in theory, if all 50 tickets sell this week before next week's video go out, then you would know next week. If it takes 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever the time frame is, it is going to be 50 tickets, and then I'll post it in the next video. So that is how you can win the car. It is going to be a link down in the description that is going to take you to our website. On that website, you can of course purchase however many tickets you want, and I believe it should also tell you how many tickets are left. So if I don't continually update, or if we're in the middle of maybe, obviously I post usually on Tuesday, let's say it's Friday, and you're just curious how many tickets are left, that is a way that you can check that. So again, it's $15 a ticket, 50 tickets will be sold. Once all 50 are sold, then I'll do the announcement in the following video. If you're local, you can of course come pick it up whenever you so choose, or if I need to ship it out to you, I will make sure that I ship it out in some sort of timely manner. That way you're not waiting forever for your fresh ride to be able to get built and then hit the track yourself. So best of luck to you, and thank you all for joining me for today's video, going over our bump steer again, and we'll see you next week.